Well, good afternoon and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this webinar entitled Electronic Signatures, Key Issues and COVID-19 Considerations. My name, as you can see, is Keith Markham, and I will be your presenter for this particular course this afternoon. Let's have a look at the particular course objectives that we have here to start with. So let's just go through those. And first of all, we're going to consider the requirements of the applicable legislation. And we're going to look at various things with regard to that. We'll then go on to talk about the relevant case law. And finally, we'll talk about a series of very practical COVID-19 related practical concerns that you need to bear in mind. Let's just elaborate on that a little bit more with a more detailed agenda. So let's have a look at that together. So we are going to begin with a kind of an overview. What will that contain? Well, that will contain some brief mentions of the Law Society guidance and indeed the most recent Law Commission report on this particular topic. Then we'll move on to talk about applicable legislation. We will look at the Electronic Communications Act 2000 briefly. We'll also look at the EIDAS regulation, which is an important EU-inspired regulation that we will be looking at in a little bit of detail. After that, we'll then go on to look at the formalities with regard to these sorts of matters. We'll see, of course, that with simple contracts, typically there is no typical requirement of any form of formality that the document must be in writing and particularly signed. However, there are certain types of document, as we're going to see, where ultimately that is the case, particularly with things like guarantees and contracts for the sale of land. And we'll look at what those formalities are. And having established what those formalities are, we'll go on to talk about the issue of case law. We'll look at several cases to do with a simple contract with a specific stipulation with regard to signature. We'll also look at guarantees, and we'll also look at contracts for the sale of land in that particular case. After that, we'll go on to talk about different types of electronic signature that the Law Commission report in particular has outlined as being acceptable. We'll see there's a huge variety of those, and we'll highlight what those are in practice. We'll then go on to the knotty issue of deeds. Now, deeds, of course, have been around for a very long time. They've been considered as part of the Law Commission report, and we'll see what that has to say about signing deeds, and also whether deeds can be witnessed electronically. And finally, we'll look at a whole series of practical considerations in the light of COVID-19. In particular, we're going to look at things like signing of court documents, signing of documents at the land registry. We'll also look at witnessing of deeds during the context of COVID-19 and social distancing. We'll go on to talk about concerns about the identity and authority of the relevant signatory of the document that you wish to execute. And finally, we'll look at issues around pre-signed pages and virtual closings and think about how that potentially works in the context of COVID.